Right, Siobhan, thank you very much for joining us. Look, let's start with Tearaway, which comes out for PS4 this year.
That's right.
I loved Tearaway. It's such a special experience to me. But the thing that I adored about it is it's so tailor-made for the Vita. What sort of challenges did you come across bringing that to the PS4, which is a really different piece of
Well, actually, the very first thing that we did was, I mean, Tearaway for Vita was pretty much like a love letter to the Vita. We loved like playing with all of the different inputs and seeing what we could do with it. And then when we were thinking we might take it to PS4, the very first thing that we had to do was fall in love with the DualShock and the camera in exactly the same kind of way.
A bit harder.
No, actually, no, because what you realise is that when you I think it's the same with the Vita. When you approach a bit of kit and you really look at it and you think, what are all of the things that this thing can do? Instead of approaching it from the other angle, which is, I just want to make this type of experience.
Yeah.
You end up sort of playing with it a lot more. And that was, so with the DualShock, it was like, right, we realized that there was so many things that it did really, really well, and the weight of it felt really good, and combining that with the camera, and then combining that with actually just the power of like the PS4, and then having a big screen. All of those things combined just meant that as we started to do the game jams, we just realized things like the light is really cool.
Yeah,
it's a really connecting mechanic. The way that we're sort of using the throw forth, and we're really inspired by the playroom there. We just realised that there was just lots of things, lots of things to do,
like untapped things. Everyone else is just using D-pads and.
Yeah, I think we're very inspired by the Japanese team. Who did you play the playroom?
Yes, yeah.
So they were, when we saw what they were doing with the DualShock and with the camera, we as Media Molecule, we were like, yes. Actually, that's a very inspiring set of things. Because
I think it's hard to not make that stuff feel like a gimmick, and that's actually why, besides the whimsy of Tearaway, and I'm a big fan of whimsy. There's not enough whimsy in game, so thank you very much.
No problem.
But it never felt like it was a gimmick. It actually felt like it was really integrated.
Yeah.
Is that hard?
Yeah, that's the hard bit, because a lot of editing has to happen.
Yeah.
So we start off by doing like these long periods of like game jams, which is when we start off. People have an idea, they have a constraint. So with the Vita version, it was what can you do with the inputs. The Vita, and with Tearaway and PS4, it was like what can you do with the DualShock.
Yep.
Starting very much there, because then people go off, try out different things, try out different ideas, and then there becomes a big editing process of some things which are like really amazing and fun, but they just are a bit too gimmicky to add in.
Yeah, right. And if you were doing them for like repeated over and over again, then you're suddenly like, oh, this is so annoying.
Yeah, so it has to feel something that's kind of natural and easy to do, so it doesn't break your flow. It's all about flow.
Yes.
Everything's about flow.
Everything is about
Everything's about flow.
And so, talk to me about the Vita, because I love the Vita.
Yeah.
I think it's a great piece of hardware.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it feels like it's slowly dying, and it makes me really sad, because it feels like it's mainly filled with ports. And that, like, lots of indie games go there, and that's great, but it's like, these are all experiences I have on PS4 or PC and stuff anyway. Why isn't the Vita, why hasn't it taken off with something like the PSP did, which was just so huge?
I think for us, that like what we wanted to do, we were very lucky within our position within Sony, is that we get to basically play with things, and we got to look at the Vita as very much like as a piece of standalone kit. We wanted to play with some new hardware, and so when we were given the opportunity to look at the Vita, we were able to come up with this concept that was fully like a love letter to it.
Yeah.
And I maybe other people don't have that same experience. So at Media Molecule, we're very lucky that we get. Like, we love playing with new kit, we love coming up with new experiences, and we're just also very lucky we're at the right place at the right time with Sony to be able to be people who can do that, have that kind of interaction with hardware.
So you get to play with the hardware, but also at Media Molecule, you guys build your own engine, right?
We do.
So what's the thought process behind doing that as opposed to going with something like Unity?
Well, we're a company with like an amazing programming team, and one of the sort of seeds of Media Molecule, I think, really comes from like Mark and Alex's formative years at Bullfrog, where at Bullfrog I mean, a lot of the way that they seem to develop games, I didn't work there, but the sort of the myth of Bullfrog really is that people had ideas, they tinkered with technology, and from those sort of tinkering of ideas and technology, games were born.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, things like Populous came from, and Magic Carpet, and there's a really great thing when you celebrate the idea of like, what can I make with this thing? What kind of what can I make appear on the screen, and how do I interact with that? And then you can riff with like, oh, that lends itself really well to this type of fantasy, or that feels really good because of, you know, and I think that's that's one of the things that we really enjoy doing. And I mean, Alex Evans, who's one of our co-founders and tech director, is just one of the most amazing graphics programmers on the planet. Yeah. We have a wonderful graphics team. Dave Smith, who's another one of the tech directors, and also is one of the co-designers. He's an incredible, writes incredible physics engines, and is able to do something that's very hard, which is code feel. You know, like feel like it's hard to almost talk about feel, but it's even more difficult to code something that feels amazing. And I think when you have those two people leading the tech team, it would be a real shame then if we didn't like build a team
if you're not taking advantage of that, and
so it's that's why. I mean, we do use like other bits of, you know, there are things that we use. We don't write everything from scratch, but we pretty much make sure that all of the things that are really important are written in-house.
And so it's kind of because the tools that were out there weren't really providing what you needed for the experiences you wanted to make.
It's more that we know we can create things that map perfectly to the kinds of things we want to do.
Yeah.
And when you're making UGC things, so with LittleBigPlanet, and then with Tearaway, that really needed to be a marriage between the way the game felt and the way the game looked. And because like the idea of Rex had of like the paper engine.
Yeah.
Really, there was one person who made that, two people actually, who joined our team, Stefan Komoda, an Aussie actually.
Right.
Yeah.
There we go. We're getting there.
Yeah. And he's awesome. And this guy, Mark Adami. And Mark is a graphics programmer and Steph is a technical artist. And between the two of them, they really listened to what Rex really wanted to achieve with the paper engine.
Yeah.
But before then, what we kind of had was something that just looked low poly. And it didn't react well. And, you know, between Stefan and Mark, they basically came up with the way of implementing the paper engine so that it basically is a paper engine. Yeah, so that when you like step on a paper fold, it's like a bit of a experience.
And it's 100% sort of practical, right?
Yeah.
Like the logic behind things folding is actually like, no, it's not just like there's suddenly game magic where it's like it disappears. Paper. It's like, no, that paper folded into that shape.
Yeah. Now, and the reason why an off-the-shelf engine wouldn't have done the same thing is
suck it, Unity.
No, Unity's amazing.
No, Unity's terrible. That's what she's saying.
So we use Unity. So I'll get onto Unity in a sec. But with the perfect marriage was like Mark listening to Rex, understanding what Rex really wanted to achieve, and then between him and Stefan implementing that so that it really mapped perfectly with the concept. And that's what we love to do. But however, Unity we have been using for prototyping.
Right.
So on our other project, which we haven't started really talking about yet, except for at the PS4 announce thing, so we sort of slightly have been talking about it. But with that, actually, whilst we've been doing a whole bunch of tech, we have been using Unity to prototype. And it's been fantastic. So, I mean, it's not that we're against other things, it's more that we use the right tool for whatever phase we're in.
And so then are you planning on building an engine for your new thing, or like adapting what you've already got?
Yeah, new.
Yeah, right. So that's a huge amount of work.
It is, yeah.
I appreciate that that's a huge amount of work. Because you're basically creating two huge things to make just one thing.
Yeah.
You don't license it out?
Yep. Well, I mean, aside from the fact that we build games for people.
Yes.
So, well, you know, that's the thing, is like we're building our own, you know, we build user-created content.
Yes, 100%, yeah. And I mean, that for LittleBigPlanet, I can't imagine how many people that actually inspired to get into gaming because of that.
Lots.
And the thought process behind trying to do something so complicated but try to make it as accessible as possible. I mean, we're seeing it now with the GTA 5 editor. I think is actually really incredible.
I haven't seen things from that yet.
You haven't?
No,
you need to check it out. Like regardless of what you think about the content of the game, the power behind being able to manipulate that camera and seeing everything,
amazing.
it's insane. Like it will inspire filmmakers.
Yeah, so like I played with the camera, but I haven't seen videos.
Yeah, it's so worth checking
That's
out,
awesome.
and it's a really fascinating. I mean, it's stuff you were doing with LittleBigPlanet in terms of like being able to look at your scene from any angle and that sort of thing, but putting it in the hands of people in an easy to use kind of way, like you've been doing. These days.
and that's something that we just love to do. Like that's one of my favorite things of the types of projects we make is just seeing what people then do with it.
Because you've hired people who made LittleBigPlanet levels, right?
At one point a third of the studio were people.
Unbelievable.
And we've grown a bit, so that number's a bit smaller now, but. I mean, we're the first place we always look is when someone sends through a CV. I mean, and a show reel, if they've got LBP stuff on it.
Have you been playing the game we already made? Yeah.
And we're making like our design team. Our design team is still pretty much made up with people who have built LittleBigPlanet content, because you have to like tools to work at Media Molecule.
Yes.
And you have to like the process of being on a team that actually builds the tool at the same time and builds an engine at the same time. But it also means that, like we have like John Beach, who's like amazing at mechs. So whatever we do, I'm like in Tearaway, he did like the Wendigo Fisher level. So wherever John goes, basically these like fairly mechy, like
intricate little
they arrive. And Dan, who works on Tearaway, also he's like. He's really into making really perfect sort of platform content.
Yes.
Christoph loves making like really good platform content, but loves a bit of the theatrical. And when they each applied, I mean, Dan actually worked on LBP whilst we were making it, but when John and Christoph both applied to Media Molecule, they came via the community, and actually John we were inundated by emails from the community to hire John. And with Christoph, he made...
Oh, really? Like people who'd played what he'd made in the game, like you should put this guy
exactly.
on the books.
And with Christoph, he applied to us when we looked at his levels. They were sort of like the top rated levels. So and that's like, it's awesome. And then we had a community team. They were LBP. They had made an LBP fan site. And then LittleBigPlanet 3, which we didn't make but was made up by Sumo, that actually was made by a whole bunch of people who were community members.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the best. It's the best when you actually see that the UGC thing you made, which is we have felt like in some ways you feel it's like the way I look at it, like it's a game, it's a UGC tool, it's a bit of a toy. It's like, but actually people when they go into the depths of it and figure out exactly all of the stuff they can do with it, they make absolutely incredible things. So you get these show reels and you're like, what?
Yeah, and then
how did you do that?
And then can progress to working on like the next game that you've got as well.
You know how to use it better than we do.
So speaking of the studio, you're technically owned by Sony?
We are owned by Sony,
Yeah. And how involved are they in the sort of day-to-day?
So one of the things that was very attractive, that's always been amazing about working with Sony, is that they have a great history of being able to buy studios. So Naughty Dog is owned by Sony, Guerrilla is owned by Sony. And when we were looking, we were talking about being purchased, and we were looking at their model is really good, and it's just like, I think probably the best way to describe it is we have just enough of support, so they're not too in our faces, but we have like commitments that we have to meet, and we see Shu probably once a quarter. Michael Denny, who's also like probably he's in charge of European Worldwide Studios, and so we're in constant contact. Part of my job is to keep in touch with everybody with all the people we need to within Sony, so that everyone has the information that they need, and then they can have the visits that they need. But also then part of my job is making sure when I know how much to bother the rest of the studio with needing to know what's going on. And some words that one of my former boss Fiona Sperry gave me were shelter and protect. And like as a producer, like part of what you're doing is like this thing of sheltering and protecting the team from like going off on one, but also from like people coming in and
100%, like
sort of just disrupting things.
Yeah, you're making these experiences. You kind of need to be doing them in a bubble. Like you kind of need to be like fostering that environment and sort of just like keeping everybody back so that they don't get their head somewhere else.
Exactly. So I think there are times when I drive everybody outside of the studio a bit mad because I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't make eye contact with this programs. They can't
I'm just like, no, we can't. Like now is not a good time to visit. Because I think that's the thing, like, you know, like for all of the fluffiness of Media Molecule and the whimsy, it's, you know, it's an environment where people are working really hard. And I think one of the things that people find surprising sometimes is how quiet it is. Like, it has moments of being really loud and obviously, like, boisterous. And there are lots of conversations that are going on and reviews and stuff like that. But actually, largely, people are just getting on with...
They're there because they want to work.
Yeah.
So. And it seems like in terms of the feel of the team, like I've read that you guys are sort of actually quite picky when it comes to bringing in new people. Like, you want to preserve what you've got.
Yeah.
Because I saw that you were recently you were hiring a chef. Yeah. And I checked out the job advert and I applied, and I was told that, like, I can't cook and I'll poison the team. But like, what is the sort of vibe that you try to? What is the vibe of the studio?
So I mean, what I think about it when I think of, like, what I want it to be, so the 5 of us who run the studio together, we're all good friends, and we're all quite different people also. But I think where we really intersect is that we want to create a studio where people don't really want to leave. We want it to be of really good people. So
because your turnover is pretty low, right?
Our turnover is very low.
Yeah.
So we want people to come and join us and then basically make games with us until we're old.
Until they die. we want to kill them.
But, like, no, we don't. But so that means that we want a place where, like, people can have families, and so we're incredibly flexible with families, with the mums and the dads. We want somewhere where people don't have to have families, so it doesn't mean that only the people at families go home at 5 o'clock and everybody else has to stay till 3 o'clock in the morning. We basically, what I want it to be is like a creative studio where really talented creative people can just feel like they can just geek out in their craft.
Yeah.
And because it's a small place, so it's not somewhere that has, like, tons of hierarchy. But what we can offer is, like, come here, do the thing you love, jam with us, collaborate with us on projects together. We all sort of share probably a bit of a sense, like a design aesthetic. We all share a love of stories. We all share a love of, like, the labyrinth.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. I love it. That's such a specific reference. It's saying a love of stories and just the general vibe and this one specific thing that you must love.
But we, you know, I think probably like Jim Henson's a really big.
Yeah.
It's been a really big influence on all of us. We love music. There's a good shared sense of humour within the studio. So yeah, but then we also really like just putting our headphones on and not communicating. Yeah, cool. And just getting on with it. So yeah.
Yeah. Where's the love not talking about?
Yeah, there's a line.
And so then, how would you classify yourself? Are you a big studio, small studio? What are you, a medium studio?
Well, we're like 50 people.
Yeah, like
what do you
permanently?
Think? How do you?
Well, I
would
say that's medium to large, right? Because do you scale up for projects?
Not really. We're
right, okay.
we probably, I think, like, on our head count we probably would go to about 60, but I don't think that like, I think 50 is our number.
Yeah, so like
so we have a bit of a, like,
you're like the same size as, like, Double Fine or something.
Yeah.
So in terms of then the future.
Yeah.
I find that, like, let's get sexy for a second. Let's talk economics.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself sort of supporting as that company? Because I feel like the bigger studios nowadays are putting out these big tentpole games that aren't really doing amazingly, and sometimes they're not even particularly good games. I feel like there's going to be this sort of, like, backlash to that, and you see places like Ubisoft putting out small experiences like Grow Home or like Valiant Hearts and stuff. Like, what's that model? Because you guys have put out, like, 3 games in 8 years?
8 years? 9, yeah. We're 9.
9 years,
we're now 9, yeah. I mean, I think Sony has a great, like, this is why I love working with Sony. I love that we're part of that group, because Sony is really doing a lot to focus on getting, like, lots of indie games out. I think, like, Uncharted does pretty well.
Yes, and
The Last of Us
Uncharted's
does
okay.
pretty well.
Yeah.
And I love the Naughty Dog. Like, really, they're exploring different themes, and they're
totally.
they're I think they're an amazing studio.
And they've got that sort of like Blizzard feel of like, we're going to put it out when it's ready.
Exactly.
Like they just delayed Uncharted 4 until next year.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I was really happy about that. I was like, great, because I don't want that to be a subpar experience. And I saw an interview with some of the people who worked on The Last of Us, and they were saying that it was up until like a month before that game came out where they were like, okay, no, this is fine now. Like this is fun now. Up until that point, we were so worried.
Oh my god, I think making it's. This works for me, but I don't know if this works for everybody, but it's a little bit like cooking scrambled eggs.
Yeah.
And you know, like the first time you ever cook scrambled eggs, you just don't know.
Yeah, this is why I didn't get the job at Medium Well.
You just don't really know, like, this is all going to come together.
Yeah.
This is going to be delicious.
Yes, yeah.
You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah, it's just a bunch of crap.
And you're stirring and you're like, oh no. And with the game, it's you don't really know. You have to solve like thousands and thousands and thousands of little tiny problems when you're making a game, and I mean you have no clue until we have like the dates of like alpha and beta, and alpha is a kind of nuts date because it really is just the very first time. Like after, like in the olden days of making games, it pretty much was like the first time you played. The olden days,
what was it, like 10 years ago?
But you'd pretty much, before like you now have to make everything that's like online and services.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
You know, but back in the day when you just finished a game and then you went on holiday and you came back and you started another game, you would get to alpha and it would be probably the first time that you'd really been able to play the game from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And now, like, our alpha has to be months before that, because we know that it's going to take us months to get from that point to actually solving the thousands of problems.
From where it like works to where it's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then from good to like, I'm really happy with this.
Yeah.
That's even, because you can get it to it's good, and then you think, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
but we can ship this, but it doesn't. That feature really isn't working, and that can be so hard, because at that point you have to make some calls of, we either now need to decide to do some serious work on this one feature, or we need to cut a whole bunch of things. And we've always cut a bunch of things around that point, and also usually had a bit of a thing of like, right, this one area really needs us to just rework it.
So when you did LittleBigPlanet, like I imagine at that point, you made the single player campaign stuff. Yeah. And then you had the user created stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like you couldn't have put out just one of those. Like it actually, the whole game was those two things. Yeah. So that at that point, that's not like, oh, the user generated stuff isn't working, let's just cut that and we'll put out this single player. Because it would be like this charming experience that then you kind of go, oh, what? It feels limited in some ways. Oh, the reason it's limited is because it's completely made by the thing that we've got here. So there must have been so much panic then, right? Because it was like, both of these need to be working perfectly.
Oh yeah, totally. So, I mean,
I'm sorry.
No, LB. Yeah, was that what did you see?
Yeah. I heard helicopters.
Yeah. It was that was an amazing experience, because UGC, wow, like you suddenly realise that. You just have to test so many things. Yeah. There are so many variables.
Yeah, because people are using this so many different ways.
So many variables. Just so many. And then it's like 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, 4 player, 2 player online, 2 people playing online and 2 people playing on the couch. It's like,
Yeah, the camera's here, the camera's here,
exactly.
The camera's here.
So with that, definitely, I mean, we had the shipping of like our game, our adventure, so that we could excite people about that. And then we didn't actually start the beta trial for LittleBigPlanet. So beta trial is really meant to be, quite a long time before you release the game. But we were inexperienced with making this type of project. And so
you started small.
Our beta trial, I know.
This is a stupid thing to start a whole thing with, just like, we're doing the biggest thing ever. Yeah. We don't know how to do it.
But I have to tell you, like, there was when I look back on that, the making of that, we made that in 2 years, and we set some really good constraints. So even though it was the biggest thing ever, where there were some really good design decisions, and I think hats off to Alex and Mark and Kareem and Alec and Dave for some of these decisions that were made really early on. Just have made sure that that we didn't lose our minds completely.
Yes, yeah.
We just lost our minds a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah.
Just enough.
But when we started that beta trial, so we shipped, that came out in like September, and I think our beta trial was like July, August. So the very first time that...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like really close. In fact, yeah, it was so
I
close.
assume you had like internal testing.
Oh, yeah. We have amazing
time,
testing. But that, I'll never forget being in our little room, and we turned on the PS3 and we were just sort of watching, and we knew that there would be like half an hour or so as people played through the first 3 levels.
Yeah.
And, and then did some tutorials. We were just there going, please build something. And then they did, and then we started to see all the levels start to pop up.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, thank God.
That would have been so
It was really nerve-wracking, yeah.
That's terrible.
And then it was just like, right, well, great. And then you start looking at what they're making and the first creations, and you're like, wow, like people get it. Because up until then, the question that we kept being asked was like, are people going to create? And,
yes.
And we sort of kept thinking, well, yeah. But like this is pre-Minecraft, it's pre like any of that.
It's also coming from people who create games. Like it's like your mentality is yes, of course I would do it if I had it, but that's not necessarily.
But then you
how
start
everyone
thinking,
feels.
well, yeah, and then people are like, well, why? And you're like, well, because we are creative beings.
Yeah,
So therefore, people want to express something, surely.
And And when people started creating stuff for the second one, I assume you guys learned a lot from the levels that people were making of like, oh, this is a completely different way of looking at it. Let's implement that as a core rule, like in a level that we're making or something.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so it was a really huge special thing that came out. Yeah. It could have gone so badly. You guys did such a good job with it. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So I have a question about virtual reality. Because it seems like this is a big thing that's happening, and at first it was like the Oculus thing, and then suddenly like Sony's getting in on it and Steam. As a concept, I'm not on board because I don't like the idea of completely closing myself away from life and from other people. For me, it's really important to share the games with other people, and it's really hard to imagine just going like, oh, sorry, honey, I need to play a game, and then just going into a room and putting this on, and then just pretty much just like that, as opposed to being able to watch TV or something at the same time. Like, why am I wrong? I guess.
Well, I mean, I am a huge fan of VR.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. And actually, I mean, I think the shared experience work that people are doing to have like the experience on the TV takes away from some of the concerns that you have.
Yep.
We recently were up at Sony looking at a bunch of the demos together, and there was a bunch of us in the room together, and we had the TV screen showing what they could see. And we had an amazing time together.
Yeah.
We had a great time together. It was like fascinating to see how each of us did the demos differently. I don't know, we were like squealing, laughing.
Yeah.
Like the whole, it was. So I think that there's a whole element to it, which is. I understand your worries, but I think that everyone is sort of trying to figure out ways of making it.
Totally, it's still very early.
Yeah, exactly, it is very early. But, I mean, wow, like, I feel like we're in the future. Like, sometimes, look at my iPhone or I noticed yesterday that someone with the Apple Watch has made, like, a spy watch game.
Yes,
Bossa Studios. And I was like, that's just the coolest thing ever, because that basically will make me feel like Penny from Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, totally.
Finally,
yeah.
and that's what I've been waiting for.
And
actually, that's the same thing I think with VR. VR is like, I am in the future. I am the demos that I've tried, and there's like we've just seen cool things. And we like tinker with things like that. Obviously, we're tinkering at work, and we haven't made a product, or we haven't but we just love like tinkering with new hardware, as you know. And I just have to say, like, you will have your aha moment.
Yeah.
You may not have had it yet, but I can guarantee, like, it is the closest thing to like being able to walk around someone's head, like that, which is nuts.
Yeah,
I mean, I find it nuts. I've been trying to describe it to like various different family members and friends who've been asking me about it, and I'm like, I can't. You're just so transported.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to explain the concept of time or something, because it's actually like you need to just be there.
Yeah, it's like we would just be here, and we would be together, and I think that the thing I'm extra excited about is very different types of game experiences will come from it, and actually it may help really meld games and other forms of like literature and music and things together in a way that's a unique kind of art form.
Yeah.
So
you do think it is actually where we're headed, like it will be as big a thing that
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I can't wait for us to actually be doing stuff with it.
Yeah,
like,
cool.
You know, actually beyond just little tinkers.
I definitely like the idea of...
Like it's a very interesting, experimental, exciting, brilliant thing.
Yeah. Well, I definitely like the idea of getting into someone else's head.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that VR has is that you can create a much more intimate sort of personal experience. Something that you guys have done that I've really appreciated with the games that you make is that you never really constrain the player in terms of like sexuality or gender and stuff with your characters. Like you had Sackboy, but you also had Sackgirl, and you could make your Sackboy dress up in like drag sack, and like and Sackboy could actually identify as Sackgirl and that sort of thing. And then in Tearaway, you had you could pick male or female characters, but I think also from memory the beginning was like it wasn't even that you are, it was like you identify
it was
as
how you're referred to.
How you're referred to, exactly. Yeah. And I think that they're tiny little things, but I don't see enough games dealing with stuff like that. I guess that like we're so obsessed with games are so technically forward. Why do you think that we haven't gone socially forward as quickly? Because it seems like the medium to be able to do it.
I think it's probably going to move rapidly forward. I mean, if I see even within the last year of just like how people are dealing with different types of audiences. I think everyone's kind of changing, and actually part of it is just also having really good tools. So for us it's like a little bit like localization, like, you know, I know with Tearaway on Vita and then with PS4, for us it was just how do we use our localization tools. So it's a very boring thing to make sure we actually like we have good tools, also therefore actually is adding this, separating out these different interactions is easy. So partly it's just that, like partly, and it's a bit like thinking about it.
I think it's mainly thinking about it.
It's just thinking about it. It's making decisions. And thinking, oh, actually, I want us to be conscious of this and do what we can and make sure that everyone who's on the other end of playing out anything that we make doesn't feel like that we have misrepresented them, as you know, and. So that's just, it's just, I think, being conscious of it. And as one does it, others follow. And I find that's one of the, like anyone I've been speaking to recently about what they're making, there's a lot of thought going in at the moment and will continue to.
Because games like, I mean, Gone Home was something where I played that and I went, this is amazing because like everything about that game I actually thought was amazing in terms of like the character that I'm playing is completely separate from any experience that I personally have had. I'm just in her head. I'm in this house experiencing a lifestyle through really subtle storytelling. It's not hitting me over the head. At the end I'm just sort of sitting there just weeping and I was like, this is so emotionally affecting. Something like Journey has the same sort of thing. Like and so with VR I do think that one of the things I am looking forward to seeing is being able to put yourself even more intimately inside those characters going forward. Because I definitely don't think it's enough to just go like, oh, you get this character is male or female, but there's no other change other than that. Like you look at like with the Assassin's Creed thing when they announced that there wasn't a playable female character, and they went, oh, because it's all this extra modeling. First of all, I was just like, I can't believe you didn't think about that before you said it. But then, you know, the new Assassin's Creed came out. We were looking at it yesterday. The China Chronicles side-scrolling one. And it's a female character, but it's like other than that, there's nothing different. And so I feel like, oh, I'm not having a particularly different experience. I'm just having a different costume on, really. So,
but it's a start.
It's
and
totally.
I think actually this is the thing: is that different studios and different games will make their start in different ways. And I actually started replaying Sword and Sorcery last night.
Oh yeah.
I was just really sort of remembering the experience of playing that and sort of, you know, having the moment of finding out who my character really was and so I feel like I think of the games industry as being a very progressive industry, and it's also the medium of our time. So it's like completely in the spotlight all of the time. So all of the bad things are really noticed.
Everything's under scrutiny all the time.
All the time, and actually, you know, like there's a lot of brilliant things that are done in games that are that, you know, like even games that are strategy games. Like strategy games aren't gendered. Like
that's just an experience.
They're an experience, and we forget that there are all of these amazing games that have actually been going on being created and beloved by communities of people who have actually sort of just been leading the way with like it's just a game, you know, and just remember that your audience are going to be people who like this type of thing, so give them the options that they need in order to be able to feel like you're not like referring to them in a weird way. It's
and I also love that it doesn't need to be male or female, that like I love seeing children's point of view in games. So something like with The Last of Us, it was like I was like, well, you know, you control Ellie for a while, but like you're mainly a grown-up man, but you're seeing the game through the eyes of a child, and you go, oh my god, I forgot how different life is when you're a kid.
Oh, totally. What was it that I was in Beyond.
Yeah, right.
I loved playing in Beyond.
Yeah.
Loved playing the little girl.
Yeah,
and I was actually just while I was playing that, I was like, that is awesome, and someone should make a game where you're just a little kid. And then I tried a few others, but Beyond was, I really enjoyed jumping between the ages and Beyond, because it's a really interesting thing of like how you identify immediately, like just her walk animation. I was like, that's the cutest thing.
Yeah, when you nail the sort of like just those, like you said earlier, the feel of that, then that's when it can completely take you back to like your childhood or something. And I think it's just a really different angle to take at something. Like I just get excited when games they go like, you can go this way or you can come in here and this is how we're entering our game.
Yeah, definitely.
And so
and that's why like I think now is like the best time ever in the games industry, because there are so many different types of experiences being made. There is not one type of studio anymore. There's like a gazillion. You aren't a certain type of person. There's lots of different types of people. There's no right or wrong way anymore. You know, there is basically just like progress and create new experiences and play with the hardware, and you know, it's a bit like music. There isn't a right way and a wrong way. A wrong type of music to be into. You have your interests and I'll have my interests, and they may overlap and they may not. But actually, it's sort of, that's what, when you know that it is like it's an art form that really celebrates humanity. And like it's one of the things that can really, it helps us transcend a bit and to figure out like how we feel about the world and how we feel about each other and how we
expose you to new things and open yourself up to new
and that's why like it gives me goosebumps, because I just get really excited by now, and really excited by the fact that, you know, it's a limitless industry, and that's why things like VR, it's like it just adds another cool thing. It doesn't mean everyone has to make VR games. It doesn't mean that VR games have to be a certain thing. They can be whatever.
It's just another thing.
It's like magic.
There
you know, like all of games is just like magic. It's like I have an idea, and now it's a thing. You know, it's like it's awesome. So
to boil that down, games are great. Well, I think that's a perfect place to leave it. So, Siobhan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so awesome.
The Tearaway is amazing.
Yes, Tearaway is amazing, it comes out on PS4 this year.
I probably shouldn't drink my water. Yeah, Tearaway
drink your water is fine. Come on.
Tearaway comes out this year. And it's magnificent, absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, and it's absolutely, it's totally a game that should be experienced by more people. And I think it probably will be now with the PS4. So that's fantastic. So that's it for today's episode of Pocket. NichBoy out.
Bye.